Ladies and gentlemen, this is Brock Beard from lastcar.info coming at you after the conclusion of what was an absolutely unbelievable and wild finish to the race here at Martinsville. Definitely let me know if you can hear me on the meantime here. It sounded a little different on my end here, but we'll definitely be talking about all the craziness that happened this weekend. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Happy early Halloween to everybody. Okay, excellent. Audio works good. I don't want to have any issues with that on this one. No shortage of stuff to talk about today. My goodness. I guess right off the bat, got to talk about Ross Chastain. I mean, we've been wondering, I think all this year during this entire debate between Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain, and wondering what was going to be the culmination of it, especially after what happened with Bubba Wallace at Las Vegas. I think we pretty much knew at that point that it was probably not going to be any kind of a deliberate wreck or anything like that. A deliberate gamer move into the corner that edged out Hamlin by just about a half car length at the last second. I don't think was on most people's bingo card coming into this finale here, but really, really crazy. And again, not to ignore Christopher Bell's role in this too. We'll absolutely be talking about that, as well as the Xfinity Series round of 8 conclusion the other day. That'll bring everything together, and we'll be talking all about that. And it's going to be interesting. I mean, gotta say, gutsy move by Chastain. I think that. It was probably in the back of our minds a little bit since what Kyle Larson did at Darlington. What was that, last year? Where he kind of rode the wall and came very close to pulling off the win. I think that was involving Denny Hamlin too, wasn't it? Unless I'm remembering it differently. It was another situation where it seemed like things were going to get real crazy, and wondering if somebody else is going to do this. And it's not entirely unprecedented given some of these other past elimination races that we've seen in the playoffs here. Of course, you've had times where, drivers get knocked out of the way at the very last second. You think about the one with Kyle Larson and Ryan Newman a couple of years ago at Phoenix, back when Phoenix was still the penultimate race of the season. A lot of different, kind of a... Anyway, jumping back into this here, but talking about the craziness from this entire weekend. Different situation with Ross Chastain versus some of the other drivers in the field there. Really, I mean, I think kind of a moment there where we didn't know exactly what was going to be happening in this one. I think that it was very easily could have been one situation or another. Certainly the list of contenders changed throughout this race, and we'll definitely be talking about that too. Let me get the leaderboard pulled back up here. Had kind of all kinds of problems. I don't know if you guys had any problems with the NASCAR leaderboard this weekend, but I was certainly having that issue there, especially getting the radio working on this. But I'm glad it started to kind of kick in at just the right time there for the final results of this one. Absolutely crazy. I want to say this right off the bat. I was very impressed with how Denny Hamlin handled that, especially given the context of everything that's happened between him and Ross this year. I think it could have been very easy for him to actually, have a situation where he would have been really upset or really angry at Ross, and especially when Hamlin himself was very outspoken and saying, okay, there's going to be some point that is going to kind of catch up to Ross and that he's going to try to kind of exact some kind of revenge there along the way. Certainly was something that I'm sure was at the back of his mind. Things just played out very differently there. Things you could point at, certainly back to Pocono, where Denny Hamlin and Chastain were battling for the lead off of turn 1, and coming onto the back straightaway there, Chastain got in the wall. Then ultimately Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch were disqualified, and things kind of changed back down the lineup there. I think that seemed to kind of indicate a little bit of a turning point where it didn't get as much attention in at least the news, or at least a lot of people talking about it. I think it was kind of a different situation there. And again, I think the Bubba Wallace thing kind of did change the trajectory of where that was going to go, if that was going to be a big concern into this here. And especially when it came down to it, where for a lot of this race, especially the closing stages of it, that you still had Hamlin and Chastain actually being just within a couple points of each other. and creating a different situation, for those guys to kind of figure out. But really, I was very impressed with how Hamlin handled it, because I was thinking, especially with the context of everything that had happened to this point, I expected him to either turn down an interview or just be outwardly very upset about it. And especially how that team's performed this year. I think what tempered that to an extent, not just the Bubba Wallace thing, but also the situation with his pit crew, very much kind of a familiar trend that we see with Denny Hamlin for many races here. Is unfortunately, he just has problems with the pit crew. And I know they did a bit of things where they kind of switched it around with Kyle Busch's pit crew and tried to kind of work around it that way, as we usually see teams do, especially if they make a further round than some of their teammates. But definitely that wouldn't have been as much of an issue if it weren't for a couple of those, because, he had easily the best car in the middle stages of the race. Seemed like he couldn't be touched at all. But again, and I was talking about this with Lastbro during the race, it seems like there's been a lot of situations where Denny Hamlin has found himself in exactly that situation and had a problem where, Denny Hamlin would lead, he led 381 laps of a 400 lap race at Richmond. And then he had the flat tire. The famous race where Dale Jr. and Kyle Busch, had that thing where Kyle spun Dale Jr. out. The only reason that happened was there was a 3-wide pass where Denny Hamlin had led almost the entire distance and had a flat tire and got passed by both of them. That situation wouldn't have happened until that point. So that's kind of the thing that's interesting to me, is that, it wasn't even an entire, situation with that. So kind of crazy how that worked out. But that was another thing to kind of look at the same time there too. But I don't know. Just crazy what was playing out there. But again, kudos to Hamlin on that. I mean, that's gotta be a crushing way to lose. I mean, imagine Tommy Joe Martins just tweeted about this. You're coming down to the finish line. That, you got a good chance at it. You're just right on top of it. You're going to have a good finish. And then suddenly this other car just comes blasting around the corner there. One thing that was kind of mentioned by a lot of people, and I think that was still, could have been a concern. And I think Chastain was right to bring this up too, was worrying about the car hitting the crossover gate. I think if that could have absolutely been a very serious situation there. You think about different situations. Think about different situations where other drivers had collided with those walls, and then you had a problem there where you could have, a particular driver have problems and, run into it. You think of Michael Waltrip at Bristol. You think about the situation with Mike Harmon at Bristol in 2002. Martinsville, not known for having really as much high speeds, certainly not known for having accidents of that nature. But yeah, I mean, certainly when Chastain shifted into fifth gear and blasted against the wall there, that was certainly a possibility. And I think that's the one thing where people have concerns about this, is if this is going to be a continuing trend. I mean, we heard a little bit of this after the Kyle Larson situation back at Darlington, that there was going to be a possibility that drivers in the future were just going to use the quote-unquote video game move to try to blast around there at the same time and have kind of a different situation. So, it was kind of different how this played out. I think that was, I don't think this is going to be something that we're going to see every week. I think that would get a little ridiculous after a while, especially at some of these tracks where it's very, very fast. I don't see somebody trying this at like a Daytona or in Atlanta or something like that. I think that would be ridiculous there. But I think tracks with much lower speeds, again, can you really even categorize it that way? I mean, could you do this at Richmond? I guess the first question everybody's going to have is, can you do this at Phoenix? That's going to be the real question. And I'm thinking, from having gone to Phoenix here these last couple of years, it feels like, if anybody, gets into that wall, first of all, drivers are kind of in the middle groove there. You could probably get a good amount of momentum there off of that corner. I'm not sure if that would work as well as it would at Martinsville, where, again, the corners are much, much tighter. The speeds are much, much slower. You have to brake so much more for that corner. It doesn't seem like they have to brake as much for turns 3 and 4 as they do in 1 and 2. 1 and 2 is really treacherous. That's where we saw in the spring race, Chase Briscoe and Tyler Reddick were going for it. And we've seen some incidents coming off of that corner. John Hunter Nemechek lost his shot at a championship last year after pounding the outside wall at Phoenix in the very early laps of that event. So it was kind of a different situation there. And it could have been a very difficult problem for him as well. But it's hard to tell. And at 8206, I see your point too. Yeah, track is very much wider. It's true. That's a point. And again, never say never. I think at this point, anything's on the table, and especially if you're going into the last race of the season, that's something they're going to watch. Is NASCAR going to do anything about that? I think they would probably only do that if it gets to be a real big safety concern. Again, if somebody tries this at a faster track, I mean, again, any of the speeds that they have in these cars, it's going to be something that's going to be a concern. And it wouldn't surprise me if NASCAR was a little bit irked at Chastain, given the fact that, the safety of this car has been so much of an issue. In this same race, we saw 2 brake failures going into, certainly one was a brake failure with Austin Dillon, and there was another one that seemed to be the same case with Landon Castle, where they basically hit the exact same wall. We saw a very hard hit that Martin Truex had back here in 2010, where that was a situation. Now, obviously, Chastain's was different because he was hugging the outside line and riding the fence that way. There wasn't a situation of going from the banking into the fence and creating a more risky situation. There's so many complexities to this that I think that's where NASCAR is probably going to take a pretty hands-off approach to this unless it gets just completely out of hand. I hope this isn't something we see in every race, but I'll be damned if I say that was easily one of the most exciting and crazy things I've ever seen. And I think it was interesting hearing from a lot of these other drivers how impressed they were that they're saying like, wow, it's like, I don't think everybody would be brave enough to do that. But when you got it's a consequence of this championship system. If you have a situation where everybody's just a couple of points apart, and you could be a situation where you're not going to be able to get back in there, people are going to do whatever they can. And in Ross's case, where he was a full 5 positions behind Hamlin and about a half a track behind, you're going to do everything in your power to do it. So again, I think it's exciting. It's worth celebrating and enjoying and just remarking at how crazy it is. I don't think it's going to be something that we're going to see too much of, because I think there's some limitations to it. And I certainly don't think it's going to be a situation. I think it would be ridiculous if, for example, the 2 of the people in the championship 4 are like, battling for the lead at Phoenix. I guess you could clip this in case this ends up happening next week, but you have 2 people going for the championship lead, and then suddenly both of them just forget about the last corner and plow themselves into the outside wall. I think that would be pretty ridiculous. So I think when you get down to, when we get down to Phoenix, I think it's certainly not going to be all 4 of them going into the wall, at least unless we get the championship where these guys are going to be really that much more even-handed. But I guess anything's possible on that end. But kudos to Chastain. Kudos to Christopher Bell. My goodness. I know it was asked by Dale Jarrett during the beginning part of the post-race show there about what they should consider him. Should we call him the closer? Should we call him, a guy that, that is able to, or is he the Iceman? Is he, a Terry Labonte type? Is he a Kevin Harvick type? Is he the kind of guy that just lies in the weeds there and just strikes before you even know it? Some kind of equivalent of it, I think, could certainly be argued at this point. We talked about his win at the Roval. And of course, him punching his ticket there, him now doing it in Martinsville. 2 races where he was not favored to win or even really be a factor in. 2 races where he had to fight his way to get to be even a factor in the finish of the race. Things that could have turned out very differently. And times where he had to kind of fight back to take the lead in the very closing stages of it. It could have turned out very differently. I think both of them even really hinged on a bit of pit strategy too. Trying to get tires at the right time and plow through some other drivers through the field there. But and not in the sense of wrecking people, but in the sense of actually driving around them. Christopher Bell's late season run, I think, is one of the most impressive things we've seen in the Cup Series in the last few years. Certainly his win at Loudon, and then coming very close to winning at Richmond, being very much a factor in those. And the Loudon win, keep in mind, that was very late in this season. When we've had all these different winners, he was very late in those rankings, very much further down the rankings in terms of actually trying to get a win to lock themselves into the playoffs for this year. So I think that's another thing to kind of look at. And then going into Phoenix, I think maybe some unfinished business from his Xfinity Series period. I'm trying to remember exactly. He didn't win when he was in the 20 car in the Xfinity Series. Did he win the championship that year? I don't think he did. I thought somebody else won it that year. Was that when Reddick? Did Reddick win it? I got to look it up here. Yeah, 2019. Yeah, 2017. Okay, a couple of years. So look at the right page here. Yeah, Christopher Bell. So 2018 and 2019, he makes a championship for it at the final race of the year. He finishes fourth in points in 2018 and third in points in 2019. And I guess it wouldn't be at Phoenix that time. That would have been back at Homestead, I believe. Yeah, because 2020, they had it at Phoenix, but then they had the limited attendance. Yeah, Homestead was on that. So he's been very close on that. So again, unfinished business from his Xfinity series time. I think that can make him a very compelling storyline on top of Chastain himself. Obviously, Ross is going to get a ton of attention. He's already been very popular this year. A lot of people that don't like Denny Hamlin have jumped on board with him. I know Lastbro's been wearing his Ross Chastain shirt a lot of these days coming up. We got a watermelon air freshener in the car for the trip this weekend because we had anticipated if he made the championship, he was going to be pretty fun to watch and add something interesting to it. And I think today certainly did not dispel any of that. But you can't overlook the other two members of the championship group. Both of them past champions. Both of them winners at Phoenix, in fact. Joey Logano, of course, won at Las Vegas and had already punched his ticket, which is good because his car caught on fire at some point. Another bit of a controversy here between what happened with the other Ford teams, between Logano as well as BJ McLeod during the race. Seems that NASCAR still has not entirely solved the problem of the fires from earlier this year. Luckily, not to the exact same scale that we saw with Christopher Buescher, or Chris Buescher, depending on what part you want to say on that. Buescher's fire or Cole Custer's or some of the other ones that have happened this year. Kevin Harvick's, of course. But still, a little bit troubling to see that. I mean, on BJ McLeod's car, when he came into the garage, came onto pit road, there was smoke in the cockpit. I'm not exactly sure how much of that was the case on Logano's in that case. I didn't really switch cameras to his during his incident, but it's certainly something that I think NASCAR should be a bit concerned about and kind of look at too. That I think the problem hasn't entirely been solved, and I think that they need to be looked more critically at the actual foam because in this particular case, it looked like it was right in that gap between the actual panels that are covering the frame rails in the cars or the roll cage and the outer skin of the car. And what's there? That's where the foam is. I think there's enough at least circumstantial proof to look at that. So that's one aspect of it. And there's also, you got to look at also, what's happening with the other teams. I mean, thankfully we haven't seen this be as much of a problem for the Chevy or the Toyota teams, but it's very possible that you could, that something like that could happen. And I think that, NASCAR has taken it seriously to the extent that they've added that extra flange in there so you don't have rubber that kind of floats back into the rocker panel and starts some of those fires. But all fires are bad, and NASCAR needs to really kind of look at this more comprehensively. I'm encouraged by what I saw from the race to the championship thing, that they're looking at restructuring the rear end of these cars and really trying to make sure that, that they crumple a lot better, that they absorb some of the impact so it doesn't go into the driver's body. The fires are the other thing that they need to look at too. And that's certainly the case. So we'll definitely be looking ahead to that. The other aspect that certainly needs to be talked about from this race is, of course, your last place finisher from today in Tyler Reddick. A bit troubling, I would say, certainly, from the fact that he was out of the race and didn't feel well, that apparently he had an incident with another car, rear-ended another car, and apparently, did not feel well, had a, pain in his head, and ultimately pulled into the garage area. Richard Childress was looking for a relief driver. Nobody else was out at that point, so you had the other 35 cars were still running. Very, very low attrition at the first part of this race, which would probably be surprising for anybody who just watched the finish of this. But a situation where obviously concussions are not far from everybody's mind. Certainly Kurt Busch's announcement in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, the announcement now this week that Alex Bowman is coming back from his. He was at the track today. Good to hear from him. I know Ally has a very big sponsorship presence at Phoenix, and apparently the original report of him missing 3 races was not a typo with 4 races to go, that he's going to be coming back, this being confirmed earlier this week. But certainly Tyler Reddick feeling similar symptoms after having an incident himself at Homestead. I believe it was Jordan Bianchi and others were reporting the issues that Reddick still hadn't felt some symptoms from the issue at Homestead, but I guess not to the same level that we've seen with drivers like Bowman and Kurt Busch, so still ran the race. In fact, was very fast in practice, struggled a bit in qualifying, and ran 188 laps, I believe, in this race today before pulling into the garage area. Happy to hear that he was checked and released from the infield care center. Hopefully he gets looked at and examined, checked out this week before they evaluate whether or not he's cleared to run the championship race. I know he would like to run his last race with Childress, despite, certainly when he's going over to 2311 racing next year. I know there's a lot of kind of feelings that seem that they're very up in the air with the whole Kyle Busch thing versus, Tyler Reddick and the Childress versus Joe Gibbs and so forth. That seemed to certainly be a big theme throughout this entire weekend. But kudos to Childress for being there, for being supportive of Reddick and, checking on him and everything. I know that a lot of this sport is a business. It really is a business, but at the same time, the people involved in it, there's some care has to be taken there. And certainly, I think that one thing that we've seen from this year is how dangerous the sport still is, and how many risks these drivers really undertake. And if they're in a situation where, they don't feel well, then yeah, they should, there shouldn't be an environment where they're encouraged to, just keep fighting their way through it. A lot of drivers fight their way through a lot of things. We hear about drivers that fight their way through, having the flu or, food poisoning or any number of things, because these guys are on the road all the time on top of it. So, any number of things can happen. But that situation too. So, glad to hear that, Tyler Reddick was able to get out of the car. It's unfortunate the team ended up finishing in last place. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge writing about that there, as the details are still coming in on that. But regardless, unofficially, pending the results of post-race inspection, that will be your last place finisher. Only the second last place finish, incidentally, of Reddick's career. His first was at Talladega this past spring, where they had an engine failure, and his only other last place run was a disqualification from an Xfinity race at Homestead. Very infrequent that we see him finish in last, although this year he's had a lot of bottom 5 and bottom 10 finishes, those being a lot from the super speedway races in particular. However, he is not a factor in the championship. In fact, with his last place finish today, another incidental note, of course, BJ McLeod locked up his last car championship in the Cup Series. So that certificate I will be presenting to him next week at Phoenix for the Cup Series action out there. And not the first certificate that will be handed out. That's certainly for sure. So looking at other things that were happening from the race this weekend, you had the situation with Reddick and, drivers that were falling out of the race. The other thing we have to talk about is the other half of that equation, that being, of course, the situation with Kyle Busch. What on earth was going on there? That I still don't know. I don't know if he had a post-race interview during the post-race show or anything. If anybody, if anybody's heard anything, definitely let me know in the chat there. But I'd be very interested to find out what exactly was going on there, because he was absolutely terrible during this, and he was saying nothing on the radio, at least not the times I was listening to it. I didn't really track Kyle Busch until about 75 laps into this race, and suddenly he's down to like 34th or 35th place. And usually when that happens, especially at a bigger track, you can believe that that's going to be an unscheduled pit stop. But the indication was that he was just slow. He was just actually dropping to the back of the pack, just not running very well, and, not running that many more laps down than anybody else. Thankfully, the onboard cameras that NASCAR has put in here has really kind of allowed us to kind of look at things more critically there and kind of see what's happening, if there is something, unusual just from the visuals. Looking at Kyle Busch's camera from that point forward, it was very clear that there was something that was going on there with that car. I think that it was definitely a situation there where, he was coming off the corner every time, and cars were slipping by. It seemed like 2 cars were getting under him off of turn 2 and turn 4 every lap. And it got to the point there he was dropping down the lineup. And I was wondering, what on earth was going on? I know Ty Dillon had dropped back at the same time, too. Ultimately, he actually fell out of the race. It seemed like Kyle Busch, at least from the results I saw so far, finished the race under power, though many laps down. But during those 130 laps, he was well off the pace and so far off of it that he was completely out of contention by the time stage 1 ended. I believe he was between about 4 to 5 or 6 laps down at that point. Actually, he was 4 to 5, and then he lost a 6th lap under the stage 2 period there before Reddick fell out of the race. Very unusual. I know that Kyle Busch earlier in his career, especially earlier in his career at Joe Gibbs, had struggled a lot at Martinsville. I remember they tried to do something different where they'd use like an exhaust brake or a Jake brake kind of thing, like on semi-trucks to help his car through the corners. They were trying everything to kind of get him going there. And I believe he finally, pulled off a win or at least, some decent finishes there. But it's still not been, I think, one of his best tracks out there. But certainly not a track where we'd expect to see him run this far back in the field. And then, of course, ultimately on the onboard camera, you could see B.J. McLeod run just past him just as fast as anybody else. And B.J. at that point was about 2 or 3 laps down and was still ahead of Kyle Busch all the way to the point when he had the fire on the 78. So, again, it was good. It sounded like they disconnected the radio pretty quick. I don't know anything more on BJ there from that incident. I didn't hear anything about him going to infield care center. So it sounded like he got out of the car quick enough before there was anything else. Hopefully, we'll hear any other information on that. But I didn't hear anything that was more serious there. Certainly, and I saw this mentioned in the chat too, definitely got to talk about the situation with Jordan Anderson. Great to hear from him after the incident that he had at Talladega, the very scary fire that he had there on the number 3 truck in the early laps when he was competing for the lead, in fact, in the early laps of that race. Had an incident, had to get out of the truck very quickly, and understandably so. The pictures he posted on social media, very harrowing, what was left of his uniform and the inside of the truck there. But very good to see that, he's still recovering, not ready to come back and start racing again. But apparently was also at Martinsville this weekend. So, again, a lot of storylines kind of coming together with drivers that, we're expecting to kind of hear more from, similar to the Kurt Busch thing earlier this year. But I think that's another thing to kind of look at too. But yeah, definitely looking forward. I don't know if he'll be at Phoenix, but we'll see what's going on that end. Obviously his Xfinity program, still trying to get to the end of this year with that. Tried to expand that program into 2 cars. At one point, Anderson running some races in that car. But it's been a very challenging year, and that fire certainly did not help things. But very thankful that he's recovering well from that. It's still a long road to go. We talked about this back on the Talladega show, especially the day after somebody suffers burns as serious as his. Those are the real critical steps that you got to really make sure you get the right treatment. And it sounded like from the initial post that he was making that they were definitely taking that kind of treatment there too. So that's certainly good to see and good to hear from him and the entire program over there. So looking at the race results here, I kind of want to get into this a little bit. Let's see. So other contenders for here, Christopher Bell, again, your race winner today. Congratulations to him. Pending post-race inspection, of course, is your race winner. BJ McLeod should still be your last car champion for this year because he could actually lock it up with a bottom 5 finish. So as long as not more than like 5 drivers are disqualified from this one, he'll still be in that situation because he ultimately finished next to last with the fire on board his car there, finishing in the 35th spot. Austin Dillon was your 34th place finisher after the brake failure. Landon Castle into the wall as well. And Ty Dillon rounding out the bottom 5 are your bottom 5 finishers in this particular case here. Kyle Busch finishing 6 laps down in the 30th spot. 5 of those laps lost during the first 130 laps alone. A very unfortunate day here for that. Hopefully he can give M&M's a bit of a better run there at Phoenix next week. Although Phoenix is a very fast race and it goes by very quickly. And again, if you have a long green flag run in the first stage, you could find yourself in a very similar situation. This is a problem not just for anybody in the back of the field, but people going for the championship too. It's very easy to get in a hole that you can't get yourself out of. And that's going to be one thing to certainly watch for next week when we get into Phoenix and the championship there. So we'll see what happens at that point. But Kyle Busch, your 30th place finisher. Looking further up in the lineup here, other drivers that really kind of impressed in this one. Chase Briscoe. I know that, it's been kind of a hot and cold thing for him this year. There was, of course, the controversy over him making this next round. Unfortunate that Stewart-Haas Racing, lost that appeal. I know the NASCAR has lost a number of those appeals this year, but Stewart-Haas Racing and the 50-point penalty for Custer. Custer really, I think he's getting entirely too much attention. from that result there. I know that NASCAR wants to take a hard stance on team orders, and I do support that. But I think it's unfortunate that the driver is getting so much of this focus because the driver's just following orders. He's just doing. I mean, you got these other guys telling you that you should check up, and we're talking about an instant. You're talking about a simple moment here, and the guy checks up. I mean, it's like, look, talk about the people that are actually making these orders and where the decision's coming from. Go to the root of the cause there. I saw so many unflattering pictures of Cole Custer these last couple of weeks, and it made it seem like he did it on his own, which completely mischaracterizes what exactly happened there. I know that they were looking at other evidence and that contributed to their decision, but from the evidence that's been presented, I don't think there's anything that was really warranting Custer getting that much disproportionate attention from all of that. And thus, it was really enjoyable to see him have a good run for a lot of this race. Was between third and fourth for a lot of this, in spite of very, very long green flag runs. But again, mentioning Custer, his teammate, looked like he was going to have a chance at it, actually. Tires didn't seem to matter, at least on a very, very short run. The fact that Briscoe was able to have the lead and Custer right up there with him, and the fact that the two of them got away. If this was a late race restart under the same circumstances, and maybe it was only about a 5 or 6 lap sprint to the finish, we'd be talking about Briscoe being in the actual championship 4, unless, of course, Chastain did the exact same move and maybe, tried to get around him that way. But if, at least from that part of the story staying the same, we could have very easily had, a situation where Briscoe could make it to the next round. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way for him, but it was very, it was a good effort for him. I mean, it was the only play they had. And and as much as, you have these ridiculous late race cautions, it was very interesting to see such a difference in strategy. And of course, ultimately the different situations on pit road for a lot of these different drivers and teams throughout the lineup. And again, Denny Hamlin struggles, other drivers trying to kind of work their way into the picture. But everybody was going for him. I think the one thing you could say about it, and maybe this contributed to why Denny Hamlin was responding to this this late race exchange of position the way he did, is that everybody seemed to have a fair shot at it. Everybody had a shot at it. You had about 30 or 40 laps there at the end. Even William Byron, who was my fantasy pick this week because he won the spring race in Martinsville, he didn't even sniff the lead the entire time today. But he got up there and he was about 6th place for like one of those last restarts, and he had a shot at it. Ultimately, it didn't come to pass, but everybody got to go for it there. And I'm not saying that every time everybody needs to be able to. Some races are just going to be like last week at Homestead, where one guy is going to come in there and just completely, entirely destroy the rest of the field. And when that happens, there's nothing really you can do about it. That's going to be the same problem that you can have here. And we saw that a bit with Denny Hamlin today too. I mean, it was very much the same situation that, could have been Hamlin. It could have been anybody else. It could have been the same situation, for a lot of these other playoff guys. And we saw how quickly and how violently, really, the playoff standings changed here, too. But again, I think Briscoe did a fine job in that one. Still finishing the 10th spot there. But again, I don't think he has anything to hang his head about. He was going for it, knowing that he was a spring race winner at Phoenix. Hopefully he would have had a better showing there than he did, than Byron did at Martinsville for being a spring race winner. But I think it's another one to look at. Bubba Wallace, mentioning him, coming back from the one race suspension, finishes in 9th place. I think that's now his best ever finish at Martinsville. He was 11th in the race in 2020 when he was battling Jimmy Johnson in that race under the lights there. Now he comes back and he finishes in 9th now. Fantastic run for him. A great recovery. And I think it was fair that they brought up in the pre-race there that one of the reasons that Bubba was frustrated about the suspension, and rightfully so, as much as I think it was still deserved and, definitely still needed to happen, is that he had a lot of momentum this year. And that's understandable. This second part of the year, much like Christopher Bell, you go back to Bubba's win at Kansas, the other race, coming back from the penalty at the Roval, at a road course of all places, to get a top 10 there. Several great performances that he's had down the stretch here. He probably just wanted to keep that going. Given how much Kyle Larson dominated that Homestead race, I don't know if anybody could have had anything for him there, even Bubba Wallace as well. But again, I think it's another thing that's positive to glean from this race as well. Brad Keselowski on the same tone here. Looked like he was going to really have a shot at it, much like at Bristol, where he and Chris Buescher were going at it for the win. This is another track that could really favor a veteran and, using their skills to kind of get back up there and really be a factor in the outcome of this race. Had a couple moves, was really going for the lead, locked it up off of turn 2, and that kind of dropped him back a bit, locked it up a couple more times, and still finished in the 4th spot. Coming off his first top 5 of the year at Homestead and getting another good run here at Martinsville, a track where he himself has utterly dominated the field before. That one where Chase Elliott, was the only other driver that was in his zip code here a couple of years ago. He's still definitely the same driver that's capable of that. And maybe with Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing having another year of notes under their belt with this new organization, maybe next year we'll have an even better shot at getting some more wins next year and kind of getting things going. So I think things are looking very positive there for the RFK stable after this race here. Ryan Blaney still doesn't have a win in 35 of 36 races this year. Came close in his own right, seemed to kind of sneak his way through running the discount tire scheme that we see his teammate Austin Cindric most often run. But very, very well could have pulled this one off as well, finishing in the 3rd spot there. I really felt like he still had a legitimate shot at actually making the championship 4, in spite of the fact that he's only, he hasn't won a race this season. He very well could have pointed his way in and been a factor in this, and maybe could have been in a situation like Matt Crafton a couple years ago in the Truck Series, where you can win a championship without winning a single race all season. I don't know how popular that would have been, but maybe it's something about that Menard sponsorship or something between those two teams. But almost happened there. But again, Blaney, I think at this point, just close out the year as best you can, maybe pull off a victory there. And if the championship people are kind of fighting for second on back, who knows? Stranger things have happened. We could still get 20 different winners this year. And we saw some very good contenders for it in this race today between Ryan Blaney and Brad Keselowski and others in that respect too. So I think that's other ones that you could certainly look at. Harrison Burton was in the top 10 for a good portion of this race. The Wood brothers running well at Martinsville shouldn't be that entirely surprising. I know that team's changed hands so many times between Roush and Penske and their new incarnation of that program. But I'm sure there's some very old notes that they have back to the 40s there that they can keep that 21 car just as fast as ever. Good to see them finish. They finished just outside the top 10 in the 12th spot there, 1 spot behind Chase Elliott. And fine run for them as well. Todd Gilliland, our good buddies over at Front Row Motorsports here, had a good showing here too. They were about top 20 the entire race, finished in 14th for Gilliland, probably one of his best overall races. I know he had the top 5 at Indy on the road course this year, but another one that they could certainly look at positively going forward. And that's not to say about the Truck Series as well for Front Row Motorsports, that Zane Smith now going into the Championship 4 next week and being a real factor and actually trying to get the Truck Series Championship in the number 38 team too. I think things are kind of looking positively for all of Front Row Motorsports. I still think Ty Majeski has all the momentum in the world on the Truck Series side. I think it's going to be very exciting to see, especially going to Phoenix, where Alan Kulwicki won his first race, and Majeski being part of the Alan Kulwicki Driver Development Program. I know he is absolutely waiting to do a Polish victory lap as a champion of the Truck Series. Things can only be so perfect. I think, again, I can't play favorites with particular drivers, but I do feel preference to certain stories, and I'm itching to write that one. That would be an interesting one to kind of chronicle there too. But he'll be interesting to see, just like everybody else next week. We'll talk more about Phoenix along the way, and I also have the magnet to reveal here as part of our show and tell segment here. Got a couple things for show and tell this week. And that'll be certainly something we'll talk about here tonight. Other drivers further back, Cole Custer ended up slipping back to 15th after the tire strategy at the end of it. Kevin Harvick was up there for a bit, back to 17th spot. Michael McDowell was the last driver on the lead lap. In a race like this, as crazy as it was, I think a lead lap finish is still something positive you can draw from that as well. Ty Gibbs in the 20th spot. We got plenty more to talk about him in the Xfinity Series portion of the show here. We'll get into that here in a little bit. Noah Gragson, I guess now his last run in the 48 car, with Bowman coming back next week at Phoenix. Gragson finishing in the 26th spot, 3 laps down. So yeah, the Las Vegas run, I guess, was probably his best run in the 48 that we've seen out of him this year. So it was awesome. It just makes me more aggravated that we couldn't get the interview for him there at that with Hendrick Motorsports. But I thought that was a fine performance that he put together. Maybe we'll work something out there at Phoenix coming up here next week. But that's pretty much most of the results there on the Cup Series side there. But my goodness, I mean, it's such a bizarre race in general that you have a a situation where you have like all these different drivers that are actual contenders that are going for the that are pulling off wins and going for the championship. I don't think anybody could have predicted the championship fours that we've had. Certainly in the Cup Series and the Truck Series. The Xfinity Series maybe a little bit less so with the JR Motorsports. Almost a complete sweep there. I mean, Sam Mayer, my goodness, almost shut everybody else out, if not for what really happened at the end of that race too. And we're going to dovetail into that pretty soon here at the same time. But that'll be another one to kind of talk about here too. So we'll get into that. Let's talk about the Xfinity Series race here on that. Get a little bit of that. There we go. So so if we're going to talk about the Xfinity race, I guess the first thing we got to talk about on that one is our good buddy Ty Gibbs and the number 54 car at Joe Gibbs Racing. And I know I've come on this show many times in support of Ty Gibbs. I think still that he is a very interesting, and I think he's going to be a very, very good talent. But, my goodness, I can't abide some of these decisions he makes on the track there too. And I can't, blindly, follow, ignore some of these things that are happening, that he's doing on the track here at the same time. I know we've had the Martinsville thing earlier this year, but this one here was pretty egregious. And I think Steve Letarte put it best at the end of the race and said that he was just not impressed. And I'd have to agree. I think that, especially given how there was good, hard racing at the end of that Xfinity Series race between Brandon Jones and Ty Gibbs. And they were perfectly content to trade bumpers. I mean, at one point Gibbs would lead, at another point Jones would lead, and they just go back and forth and back and forth. And it seemed like it was only going to come to a point where one of them or both of them were going to spin out. But it was going to happen in traffic, maybe in turn one on the first lap of the restart. And I think most people would have been okay with that, regardless of outcome. And maybe even in a situation where both of them spun and took each other out, and, the third place, Noah Gragson, won the race, I think we wouldn't be even thinking about it as controversial. And I don't think it would have reflected as badly on Ty Gibbs. But much like with the Bubba Wallace situation in Las Vegas, I think the circumstances of the spin, the circumstances of the actual incident, really do control like how this has to be discussed going forward. So I do think that this was a situation that didn't really need to happen. I think that if Gibbs was going that fast into turn one, a lap after the restart, and running into the back of the 19 car and taking him out of the race, if he had enough speed to do that, he had enough speed to get under him, at least shove him up the track and take the lead that way. Or maybe just get under him and make a clean pass for the lead. It's a shame because I think that what's good about racing is that if you have a good race between a couple of drivers that are just like so evenly matched and they're trading spots and they're doing this and that, you want that to kind of keep going as much as possible. And eventually somebody's going to burn off their tires, they're going to hit the wall, or they're going to spin out. That stuff happens. But I think if Gibbs had cleared him that way, I don't think there would have been any particular problem. And I do think that there is a world of difference where, he just drilled him into the corner and just straight up took him out. And I know there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. Obviously, Brandon Jones isn't coming back to the Joe Gibbs Racing team next year, is now changing teams. So I get it. I get there's some aspect of it there. But what possible sense does it make if you're driving for Joe Gibbs and you got all these Chevys around you, especially the JR Motorsports ones, and you know that if you do this, it's going to be you and 3 JR Motorsports guys, and, including Noah Gragson, who's been absolutely on fire this year. Do you really want to have that situation? Now, maybe Gibbs thinks that maybe that's going to be the easiest situation for him, that he doesn't have to worry about teammates or anything like that, and all the focus can be on him. But again, sometimes when you step over people on the way up, they're going to step on you on the way back down. And I think there's a lot of people, Dave Moody and others, that are expecting that, this might not be the end of that story, and we might see something very different at the end of the, during the Xfinity race there. Brandon Jones himself has a number of races where he's finished last without completing a single lap. And whether or not that's going to be a situation here or if there's going to be somebody else involved in it, I don't know. I do think that it still needs to be viewed in the Bubba Wallace context of that incident. If something like that does happen, and you got people taking each other out in a really dangerous situation, I hope it's not going to be something like a left rear thing and, you have a high-speed impact with the wall. Phoenix is very treacherous already with coming down the banking on the dog leg or coming back up the track. In those cases there, it could be very hair-raising in those situations. But again, it could just be a situation of Jones simply holding up Ty Gibbs or staying out on old tires and pulling like what Cole Witt did on that Daniel Suarez championship or something like that. I mean, it could be as simple as that. You never know. I mean, this is, of course, the same team that just last year had Daniel Hemrick win his first race and take the championship at the same time with a last lap bump of Austin Cindric going into the final couple of corners. Hard to tell, but I know that NASCAR is probably going to look the other way on this so far, at least to gin up more interest for the championship. It's already sold out for the Cup Series. I imagine it's pretty close for Xfinity and trucks. But that's going to be, again, I just hope whatever happens, it's not done in an outrageously dangerous way like the Las Vegas, excuse me, Las Vegas situation. Sorry about that, folks. I don't mean to cough as if I'm saying that insincerely. I do mean that. If it is, hopefully it is a situation that it isn't handled too dangerously. If something does ultimately happen between Jones and Gibbs, I know the rhetoric between these different drivers has already kind of showed that there's no love lost between these two, and that's absolutely going to be the case. What happens there? So that's another one to kind of look at the same time. But regardless, Ty Gibbs with the nose shoved in and everything is your race winner. He's going to go against three of the Junior Motorsports teammates in Allgaier, Gregson, and Berry. Gregson and Berry making their way in as race winners and having that situation there. Sheldon Creed in the second spot, Riley Herbst in third, Noah Gregson back to the fourth spot with Allgaier and Mayer right behind, fifth and sixth. Nick Sanchez, another great run. I believe his first career top 10 finish. A fine showing out of him, finishing in the seventh spot there. Daniel Hemrick, Austin Hill, and Blaine Perkins, a top 10 run out of this. I think that at the end of this, everybody was probably expecting that there was going to be some kind of a wreck or an actual fight between Brandon Jones and Ty Gibbs. However, we did not get that, and I think Jones was very, very, calm under the circumstances of this situation there with him and his soon-to-be former teammate. But at the same time there, we ended up having a fight between Austin Hill and Myatt Snyder on the back straightaway pits there between a couple of drivers there. Kind of surprising that came to pass. I know it's disappointing for Hill, given how good he's been this year, especially on the super speedways. I don't blame him for being frustrated at all. But at least from the report that we saw during the broadcast, it sounded like there were some other words exchanged after the fact there, and things kind of took off from there. And that was kind of the situation. Also, a bit of words between Raja Carruth and Jeb Burton at the end of that race. There, Carruth with a great run. I believe that was his. I think it was his career best finish on that as well, the 12th spot there, and in only about 5 or 6 Cup starts between him and Nick Sanchez. I think the future in these ARCA guys getting into the Xfinity Series. Anybody that believes that ARCA isn't a good place to develop talent, I tell you, look at those two kids right there, because they're going to be very, very tough in the Xfinity Series too. Nick Sanchez and Raja Carruth. I'm very impressed with the both of them, and it sounds like they're both going to be running at Phoenix. I know there's other plans of the 48. We'll talk about that here too. But they're, great run here that they had in this, in a very difficult race too. With, these were drivers that weren't involved in a lot of incidents. I know Jeb took exception, I guess, to how Raja was racing him there. But that was handled there at the same time. We've seen Jeb Burton get in a few scuffles this year. He had one with Noah Gregson earlier this year too. I know they've had a lot of frustrations. Jeb himself has been very much in the last car Xfinity Series contention this year. But things have changed, a bit on those standings as well. We'll talk about that too. No shortage of stuff to talk about on this one, folks. I can't exaggerate. But those had some fine runs there too. And Jeb Burton himself had a good run. I think that 11th place run that tied his Richmond race from the spring race here for his best all season in the 27. And given the performance he's had this year, I think that he would be more happy than frustrated. Derek Griffith. Didn't talk about him in the article, but a 15th place showing, a great career best run for him. Sam Hunt Racing, I think, is one of these Toyota programs that doesn't get talked about much, but they get a really good driver pipeline in there, and they seem to help anybody, whether it's Colin Garrett or, any of these guys. John Hunter Nemechek's had some rides in there. It's been really impressive to see them up there. Jeffrey Earnhardt's had some good runs with them. That's where you can kind of look at, too. You have your top 10 down there. Now, at the other end of the field here, Bailey Curry is your last place finisher from this one and actually joins the Last Car Xfinity Series Championship with the Cup Series unofficially, of course, pending the results of post-race inspection today, but pretty much assured now, BJ McLeod being your Last Car Cup Series championship or champion winner. And last week, Spencer Boyd locking up the Truck Series side of it. The Xfinity Series is exactly the opposite. We have, I believe, 9 drivers that are still eligible for the Last Car Xfinity Series Championship. It is going to be extremely close coming down to it. Bailey Curry has now taken the lead with 1 race to go. Not unprecedented. It's happened in other series before. Just last year in the Cup Series, Joey Gase took the lead at Martinsville by finishing last there and ultimately did take the championship at Phoenix when things played out that way. But I don't believe even he had this many contenders hot on his heels. Brennan Poole will be running out of the Grooves paint scheme next week and is just 5 bottom 10s behind Bailey Curry. They are tied on bottom 5s, which means that Poole can actually take the Last Car Championship by finishing in the bottom 5 if Curry does not finish in the bottom 5 and does not finish last. That's how close it is. Everybody else behind pretty much has to finish last to take the championship, but these are your contenders. Jeb Burton with 2 last place runs, 4 bottom 5s and 8 bottom 10s. Raja Karuth had 2 last place finishes, which were his only bottom 5s and bottom 10s. Joe Graff Jr. has the most bottom 5s and bottom 10s of any driver with 1 last place finish. Behind him are J.J. Yaley, Matt Mills, Brandon Brown, and Sheldon Creed. Any one of those drivers, depending on how things shake out, some of them need more help than others. That'll be something that I'm going to be trying to kind of track at the track side there next week for the Xfinity race, could end up with the championship there. So several certificates are already going to be printed this week and laminated. That's going to be something to be working on tomorrow and getting that all set up. I've got to see what the entry list is here. I want to kind of get them accurate to the team car numbers on there if possible. Certainly guys like Brandon Brown and Matt Mills have changed car numbers a lot this year. Really Joe Graff Jr. too. But that's something we're kind of looking ahead to at the same time. So this is going to be kind of a little bit different this year at Phoenix. Again, Truck Series and Cup Series, and basically I'm going to try to present those certificates during the lead up to the races there, like in practice or something else instead. But in terms of the Xfinity Series 1, that's going to have to be done during the race. And so next Saturday is going to be very, very interesting. It could end up even being a situation where, again, you can't wait till the race is over with in case the team leaves there. So might end up giving a certificate to one person, and then maybe the championship passes to somebody else, and I got to give the certificate to another person. That could very well be the situation. If that does happen, of course, that's going to be part of my trackside coverage there, and I look forward to you guys following along on that. Our Las Vegas coverage was very successful. We had some great views on the great social media activation during that weekend. Looking to do very much the same. Lastbro and myself making final preparations on that to head on down to Phoenix this week, and I think that's going to be something very interesting to look forward to. So let us look at, so we got the other Xfinity Series drivers that are part of the championship there. And again, Bailey Curry just joining that group there at the same time. It's good to see a returning sponsor in Aleve back in there. According to Racing Reference, they hadn't sponsored an Xfinity Series car since way back in 2003 with Matt Kenseth. So a very different set of circumstances there, but good to see a sponsor back in the sport. Unfortunately, they had problems there. Hopefully, they'll run that scheme again. I'd love to see that car in person. I think it looked like a real showstopper. But Landon Castle, your next to last place finisher, very similar to what Curry had, a flat tire going into the corner, taking him out of the race at that point. Chad Fincham was looking to lock up last place in that race there in the early stages, had many brake problems, ultimately was taken out of the race because the brake fluid kept boiling out of the reservoir, it sounded like, from Carl Long's discussions on the radio. It finished back in the 36th spot. Matt Mills in 35th and Yaley in 34th. Eliminated from the race. Those bottom fives were very much a factor in finalizing this actual lineup and determining who was still in there. We knew during the race it was going to be at least 4 contenders, and once we got the finalized results out there showing that it was 9 different drivers eligible for this next week. So we're going to have 9 certificates on hand next Saturday, and finding out who's going to be going home with those. And then any extra certificates I have left over, I'll make those available like we did last year. We actually had really popular auctions on that last year, and if you guys are interested, we'll have those available, so that'll be cool. We'll probably just make those as separate deals, and maybe we'll do bidding instead of buy it now this year. If anybody's a particular fan of any one of those drivers, that could be something that would be kind of different there. Each one of them are going to be signed by me. We'll put a last car sticker on it and laminate that thing, and get that as, it's kind of become its own thing this year. It was very popular last year. Big kudos to Joey Gase, David Starr, and Jack Wood, who we handed them out to last year. All 3 of them were really cool about it. Even though in those cases, all 3 of those were during the races themselves. It was very cool in that one. I don't count on that. I know some people are going to be kind of confused about it, or, hopefully not too offended about it. I try to kind of weave a driver interview into it, so we kind of get that at the same time. But that's kind of what we're going to be looking to do, among other things, as part of our Phoenix coverage this week. We're going to be heading out Wednesday, and should be at the track by Thursday evening. I don't know if we'll be there in time for the practice sessions on Thursday evening. Hopefully we will. That's something we're going to kind of look to cover there. But at the very latest, we'll certainly be there for all the track activity Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And that's going to be very packed with the Truck Series, the Xfinity Series, the Cup Series, as well as the ARCA West Series. It's going to be very interesting to see how things shake out on that end. But let's see, other drivers throughout the field here. Sammy Smith, my goodness, came very close to actually stealing a win there at the end. Unfortunately, ended up routed out of the way, as so easily can happen at a short track. I think he's got a lot of things to look forward to next year, whatever his deal is. We touched on this a little bit just a second ago with Nick Sanchez. Of course, the very big news on the Xfinity Series side, and a personal congratulations I want to give to Parker Kligerman for locking up an Xfinity Series full-time ride for Big Machine Racing next year. I know I've been very outspoken about what's happened with Jade Buford this year. I feel like he didn't get a good shake on that, and I know they've gone through a lot of different things this year with putting Cup Series drivers on there with different levels of success. And I think Nick Sanchez is going to find a good Xfinity Series ride with the performances he's put up this year. So I'm not concerned about him. But I'm overjoyed that Parker Kligerman has landed a full-time ride. He has absolutely more than earned it. And as he put up on his Twitter feed there, showing video highlights from his career, he has worked so hard. I remember when he was in the ARCA Series, he was just absolutely winning things left and right for the Cunningham team. And just absolutely dominating out there. And again, talking about guys like Sanchez and like Raja Caruth, Kligerman's very much in that same vein of being a guy that can really get up there and be a real contender from the ARCA Series into the Cup Series. Unfortunately, things didn't quite work out that way. Development deals fell through. Sometimes just timing just doesn't work out. But he's more than stayed visible in the sport, driving for Precision Performance Motorsports, driving the 46 car, or the Brandon Godovic effort, and getting a top 10 at Road America. The run for when he had the Fast sponsorship last year, and all the effort he did with that, and driving for the Gaunt brothers, and getting a good run for them at Kansas. And now just and in between all of his great work for NBC, NBC's going to be, losing themselves a broadcaster because he's going to be full-time on that. But they're going to be gaining a storyline that is going to be very exciting to follow next year. I cannot wait to see what he and that team can do, especially with Scott Borchetta's background in road course racing. I think Kligerman is going to be fantastic for that. Of course, as the winner at Mid-Ohio this year, and also bring on the super speedway experience from his wins at Talladega. it's gonna be very interesting, and I think that's a great piece of the puzzle. So congratulations to Parker, very well deserved, and I think that's gonna be exciting to see coming up next year. So it's gonna be one of the many storylines we'll be tracking going forward there as well. Let's see. I want to check out other stuff from the Xfinity Series side. Let's see. Yes, Bailey Curry on the last place run there. We got Josh Berry back in the order in the 20th spot. Let's see. I think that's most of the storylines I wanted to kind of cover on the Cup Series and Xfinity side. If there's any other questions you guys have, definitely drop them in the chat here. I got some super chats I got to catch up on here as well. Hopefully these guys are still in the chat. So I know I've been sitting on these for a bit, but that'll be one to look at. Let's go back to the top here. Alrighty. So, my goodness, thank you, Beast of Metal, first of all, for your super chat here. Drivers' Final Four, Logano, Bell, Chastain, Elliott. The owners' Final Four, Penske's 22, the JGR 20, the Trackhouse number 1, and the Hendrick number 5. Another ripple from Kurt's Pocono wreck. I wonder how Chase and Kyle handle that if they're 1 and 2 in the final laps next week. Good question. I mean, the Owners' Championship has received kind of some extra focus this year with a lot of the perplexing, things that have happened there. Of course, Kurt's wreck, like you mentioned. I guess you could even say, some of these other drivers that have cycled out. Even Bowman's probably his concussion that's happened has kind of played a role in what's happened this year as well. But, who knows? I think that's going to be, is that going to be something that they're going to be racing themselves differently for? I don't know. Chase Elliott was kind of mentioning it in this post-race interview there earlier today, that he sounded like he was a little bit, kind of had mixed feelings about it, kind of feeling a little uneven about it. Yeah, I mean, it's, who's to say? I think it could, if it's going to be decided that way, I mean, I don't think it's going to be something that's going to get too much notice out there. But if it's a battle for the lead, do I see somebody like giving up a win for the Owners' Championship? No, I don't think so. But I don't know. I guess it would be interesting to understand for the Rick Hendrick perspective or these other team owners how much they value that when they don't win the Drivers' Championship, because we're so used to seeing a situation where somebody makes the Final Four, wins the Drivers' Championship, and the owner is right there celebrating with them, and they get that too. I'm sure it means something, but I'm sure it's a hollow victory at the least. I mean, we hear about this. Didn't Formula One have this situation last year with the when Max Verstappen took the championship and Mercedes still had the constructors title? I mean, I guess there's other factors at play if you have the actual constructors championship, the manufacturer's money. I'm sure they want as many of those trophies as possible. But I don't know. It's hard to say. Michael Jensen, thank you for your super chat as well. To me, Denny getting eliminated by his pit crew. If he didn't consistently lose 5 spots every pit stop, he would have easily been in, even with Ross's move. Absolutely agree. I think if Hamlin, had better pit stops, I completely agree with that for sure. He gave up multiple spots on each of those bad pit stops. There were at least 2 bad pit stops he had in the closing stages of that race that really dropped him back in the order, where he had an utterly dominant car. And when you have a car that good, you have to absolutely do everything in your power to keep that track position because it's so easily lost. You already have the problem with the side-by-side restarts, and maybe somebody nudges you out of the groove, or maybe you don't get a good restart, or you don't get a good drive off the corner, or maybe you're behind somebody. But if you lose even more spots than that, and you're in a situation where now you got to gain 5 or 6 spots, not 1 or 2, you have every right to be upset. And I think maybe Denny was kind of felt that he was going to, not really earn his way in there at that point. Maybe he just kind of felt that when Chastain got around him, it just felt like it was inevitably going to happen. I hate to think that. I know Hamlin's spoken with sports psychologists in the past. I know he's had some brutal championship losses in the past. 2010 comes to mind, and others at the same time there. But, obviously, if he was leading and everything was the same, and Ross pulled that move, he wasn't going to be anywhere near Hamlin for the lead. I mean, Christopher Bell had completely checked out on the rest of the field there at the finish of that. If that was Denny, we wouldn't have seen any real difference. Maybe Ross wouldn't even have done the move at that point. You could feel about that one way or the other, I'm sure. But that's another way to kind of look at that, too. Let's see here. Let me get the other one on this. Rhinidius, thank you for your super chat as well. One of our Canadian viewers here. Thank you for tuning in. Ross overshadowed JGR's 200th win, which is move. Oh yeah, with his move. Excuse me. Yeah, exactly. I think I was trying to make out what was on that flag as Bell was standing on top of the car and waving it there. But yes, Joe Gibbs Racing now with their 200th win and doing it in pretty dramatic style in their own right, independent of what happened with Ross Chastain there. But congratulations to the Joe Gibbs Racing effort again, pending post-race inspection. I don't know if we had anything new on that. But yes, thank you for pointing that out too. That's definitely another storyline that kind of added to everything else at the same time. Let me check out Pockrace's page here. I'm just looking at this video here. Pockrace posted a video of Chastain reacting to his car as it rolled by, just kind of remarking how much damage was on it there. But yeah. Let's see. Chase and Hamlin. Okay, these are the race results here, so I don't see anything new on that. This is interesting. Looking at the unofficial race results, didn't really talk about this too much with Tyler Reddick's last place finish here. And again, hopefully he's doing okay as he complained of what sounded like concussion-like symptoms, or at least dizziness in the cockpit. Tyler Reddick's last place finish being listed as an accident. And very interesting in that sense. I know that he did sustain some damage to the nose of the car, but he was not on the crash clock because when the 8 went behind the wall, NASCAR said that it was a mechanical issue, that he was not out of the race because of an accident. So it wasn't the DVP. That wasn't even a factor at that point. He wasn't even on pit road. He came in the garage area on the backstretch. So it would have been a different situation there. But of course, if he got in a wreck and he went behind the wall at that point, that would have been out into the DVP, but that wasn't a factor here. Very interested that they made that decision. I think that they were still kind of grasping what the actual situation was with Reddick at that time. They didn't make the call until about lap 200, which is about 12 laps after he pulled behind the wall. So they had plenty enough time to really kind of chew over what the reason they were going to list in that. But ultimately, yeah, they do list that as an accident. The other thing that's very interesting in the results here, McLeod's reason out is listed as a fire, which is very different from what we've seen in other ones. When you had Hailie Deegan's fire in the Truck Series in Atlanta this year, that was not listed as a fire. That was listed as an accident. You've had other situations this year where drivers have fallen out because of a fire, and it's not listed from that. We've talked in the past about other reasons out that just aren't used anymore, how you don't see quit used anymore, and apparently we don't even see driver ill or fatigue listed there. Natalie Decker missed a Truck Series race recently under very similar circumstances to Tyler Reddick, where she was feeling ill, wasn't cleared to race, and they couldn't find a driver that was small enough to fit in her seat. And I know Reddick's a very short guy too, and it seemed like that was kind of what was happening there in the garage area. But still, not listed as driver ill or fatigued. In the race results, it's still listed as an accident for Reddick and fire for BJ McLeod. So accurate on McLeod's, but not entirely accurate on Reddick's. We have had situations earlier this year, like the rain-shortened race at Kansas, where NASCAR switched the reasons out incorrectly. As far as I've seen, that still hasn't been corrected, where there was a transmission problem for one team and I believe an engine problem for another one. I know at the end of the day, it probably doesn't seem to really matter, but it was a reporting of two different cars that had a 7 at the end of them, and I think there was some confusion in how they were entered. So it's kind of interesting to show that there's like an extra extra step that's taken when it's actually input, where it's relayed from the person in the garage area before it's actually input into the final results, and the team is actually declared out of the race. But that seems to still be the factor here. But I'm interested to see that, the fire is still not a reason out that is not used. I mean, it's the only way you can really describe what on earth happened with this car, because he didn't have any crash damage to it. And it wasn't caused by another issue like a brake failure or something like that, at least not from what we saw. But that is still the reason out for the number 78 there. And again, BJ McLeod, for those of you tuning in a bit later, has locked up the Cup Series Last Car Championship, again, pending post-race inspection from Martinsville. He pretty much has, because he would have to finish outside the bottom 5, and Corey LaJoie would have to be your last place finisher for this championship to get pushed to next week. And even then, it would have to happen a second time at Phoenix, where LaJoie did finish last in the spring race at Phoenix. And I believe BJ had a decent finish in the spring race too, but that would have to happen again in 2 consecutive weeks there. So a very narrow path for Corey LaJoie to get, I believe it would be his second NASCAR Cup championship, because he did get it when he drove for TriStar Motorsports a couple of years ago. So a different circumstance for him. Not seeing any different outcome here for the results here. Let's see. Okay, Pocker's just posting about 2 minutes ago video Denny Hamlin's interview after the race. Yeah, so I'm not seeing any inspection results on that end. One other statistic I was going to bring up in this article here as to the car number. The number 8 has not finished last in a Cup Series race at Martinsville since 1994, September of 94, and that was Jeff Burton, who, of course, is one of the broadcasters in here. Burton actually qualified top 5 for that race and fell out of the race early on with engine problems. Very much like Tyler Reddick, Burton had a very serious wreck the previous week as well. The previous week at Dover was where Jeff Burton had a very scary accident off of turn 4, where he blew the right front tire on the number 8 car and then hit the inside wall afterwards, some fire out of the car there. Very scary incident in that case, and also an incident where you didn't have a lot of the safety advancements, certainly not that we have nowadays. A situation there. If you want to check out the video of that, it is on YouTube. Many people have posted that video at the same time there. But a little bit of a connection there between this particular last place run for the number 8 at Martinsville versus one that happened back in 1994. So kind of bizarre way that history has kind of repeated itself a little bit. Although, certainly this year with the safety concerns with the car kind of being another issue at the top of it there too. Let's see. If Larson is leading but chases in dogfight for second. Yeah, again, I'm not sure exactly. Yeah, Larson's leading but chases in dogfight in second. I don't know how it's going to shake out in the Owners' Championship Beast Battle, but yeah, again, who knows how that's going to work out on that one. Let's see. This year swept both. Okay. Gotcha. All right. Well, we're going to do some other, Parker will still probably be with NBC Sports. Still be part of the Cup Series. Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah. I mean, well, again, Parker is going to be, whatever he does on the broadcast side, I'm sure it's only going to add to it there. So that'll be exciting. My goodness. I mean, it's one thing to actually try to juggle racing in 2 different series, but then to, race full time in a series and then do the broadcasting thing on top of it. Hey, more power to him. He's used to wearing multiple hats there. And, I don't want to, it wouldn't surprise me if he keeps doing that for sure. So that's very exciting to see. What is Jones' connection to Menards again? The Rego 1456. Oh no, I wasn't. If I mentioned Jones, I misspoke. I was thinking Ryan Blaney with Menards versus Matt Crafton being sponsored by Menards in the Truck Series in the past. I know Blaney wasn't in the Menards scheme today, but that was kind of my thinking there. If you had a driver that made the championship 4 without winning a race, that was the thinking. So no, it wasn't that situation for that. Alrighty. Let's see here. But yeah, the other situation here with the so we got the championship 4 set up for all 3 series here. I think we kind of touched on that already. The other thing that came up this past weekend, and again, pending results post-race inspection, I have now won the Fantasy Picks of the Week championship between Lastbro and myself. Those of you who follow my Twitter feed at LastCar on Brock, I've been tracking that every week. I needed to not lose more than 18 points to Lastbro today. I picked William Byron, and he picked Joey Logano. We both finished in the top 10, which even with stage points, should keep us pretty close at that point. Lastbro is absolutely dominating me all the time in this championship. He's won every one of them since 2014, and he just kind of figures out a way, no matter which car. I mean, the car pretty much shut me out of the Gen 6 era in general on that. So that's another reason to kind of talk about it on that here too. But definitely wanted to talk about. We'll do some trivia here in a little bit, and I got a couple things for show and tell. And so I'll go ahead and do the trivia section here, and we can pick which categories you'd like here in the meantime. So again, the categories, we're going to use the late 90s deal here. NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are your categories. NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. So go ahead and make sure to mention in the chat which category you'd like. We'll do some questions here for the latter part of this show. I'm going to kind of browse through here if anything else we need to talk about here too. Yeah, Chastain didn't wreck anyone. He took a line no one else was taking. He was actually out of the groove. I'm not sure he even touched anyone, said Philip Bailey. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. I know people are going to have some gripes about it. I don't know how common this is going to be because I think there's a lot of drivers that aren't really willing to do it too. I think it would be ridiculous if every race came down to it, kind of like I was talking about earlier. I do think there's a lot of tracks where it's not really possible. I think it's really a desperation move, that again, I think it's something that's probably been in the back of a lot of these drivers' minds coming into these races, but I don't think there's a lot of tracks that are designed for it. I certainly hope it's not going to be something like what's happened to the Atlanta track where we had to purposefully design a track to run a certain kind of way. I think if we start designing tracks to make certain moves, then we're basically going to have slot car racing at that point. Who's going to really want to watch that? So I don't know. But I think it's still so crazy. I got to watch the replay a few more times just how nuts that worked out. And it's amazing that it worked out. And it worked out just well enough. Like, I mean, I'm sure when he was in fifth gear and was scrubbing that wall, he had no idea how many spots he was going to gain or if he was going to get to the finish line in time. There was no guarantee that was going to work. That's another thing you can look at too. And he was just ahead of Denny Hamlin. And Keselowski was right in front of him. He kind of bumped in the back of the 6 car coming across the stripe to get the 5th spot there. Very easily could have been an entirely different story if anybody else had come out further towards the wall coming off of turn 4 or somebody spun out or just somebody just in the wrong spot there and it wouldn't have worked out. So I think that's another thing you kind of look at too. Let's see here. Yeah, Robbie Burns, at one point beat Jim McLeod past Kyle Busch for position. Yeah, that was crazy. I wish I screenshotted it. It happened so quick. And that's the thing I can't overstate. I mean, that's how far Kyle Busch was off the pace in this Cup race today. And NASCAR did actually advise him just about 5 laps short of stage 1 to pick up his pace. I can't remember the last time I've heard of some driver being so far off the pace without being in an accident, just being slow. The closest I can think of, I know Dale Jr. had a race at Las Vegas where his car was just so terrible, they ended up just parking it because it was so bad. And he finished back in the bottom of the field. I think Andy Belmont was kind of poking fun at that on his Field Fillers site back then, pointing out the fact that Jr. was back in the order from a car which just had terrible handling, knowing that handling was one of those reasons out that a lot of Field Filler teams used and continue to use for years going forward there too. But that's another one to kind of look at. Let's see here. What was Reddick's problem? Yeah. Yeah, bad car, probably bad setup. Yeah, and again, you have a long green flag run. There's not much you can do about it. I mean, it's just an absolutely, crazy situation. I mean, if you have, and I think Denny Hamlin this is one of the things he was concerned about coming into this race, is that maybe it wasn't going to be that competitive, certainly at the start of it. If you had 130 laps of, people just running nose to tail or very little passing or people just getting lapped and falling way far behind. Again, it certainly was a situation that eliminated a lot of contenders and put people in a very deep hole that they could not get out of in the remaining part of that race, even with the number of cautions we did have, which was well down from last year, running the Gen 6 car. Yeah, what if Briscoe wall rode? I don't know. It almost seemed like Briscoe was thinking about it when he was being talked about afterwards. So that'll be another one to look at. Jeff Gluck just called Chastain's move the Hail Melon. I like it. That's good. Well, there was apparently that Hail Mary in the Carolina Panthers game too. I was just watching the replays of that at the end of it. That's good. I like that. The Hail Melon. I agree. Yeah, put that on a T-shirt. That'd be perfect. Still got time to promote that at the same time too. So we'll see what things look like at Phoenix, but that'll be exciting for sure. Some people were suggesting JGR sabotage. I don't know. I mean, you can look at it both ways. I mean, was that what was happening with Reddick's thing too? But Reddick just didn't look well when he got out of the car. I think there was something going on there that just wasn't right. So yeah. Philip, yeah, any thoughts on Bubba Wallace's comments to the media this weekend? Yeah, I thought I was, the one thing I had a kind of an issue with was when he brought up that I'm glad that he had a conversation with Kyle Larson. I thought that was good. And it sounded like he initiated the conversation too. I know that's a lot, that had to be challenging, I think, on both parts, especially on Bubba's part. I thought he handled himself pretty well. I thought, he didn't seem like, he definitely seemed different from how he handled himself at Las Vegas for sure. I'm reluctant, to be too critical on top of it because I think the punishment's already been served there at that point. The one thing I did take issue with was in his interview, he said that during his conversation with Kyle Larson, he said that there were things that both of them could be working on going forward. And I'm like, that kind of communicated to me that he still didn't entirely get it, that Larson didn't really do anything back at Vegas, that he was just racing him, that Bubba kind of put himself in the wall, and then everything after that was Bubba overreacting. Like, I thought that was, if somebody said that to me after all that had happened, I'd probably stop him at that point and say, well, hang on a second. Like, let's not forget what happened here. That's the only thing I really took issue with. I thought, other than that, I thought he handled himself fine. I thought he handled himself fine this weekend. And again, congratulations to him getting a good run out there too. But that's the only problem I had with it. And I know Denny was asked questions about it too, about if he believed that was kind of the situation too. But that was the only issue I had with it. So other than that, I think the matter's resolved. I don't think there's going to be anything more about it. And especially with Denny Hamlin not being in the championship, I'd be very surprised if there was anything more out of Bubba Wallace versus Kyle Larson or Denny Hamlin versus Ross Chastain going into Phoenix. I think the race will just play out more naturally. Now, we could see a new rivalry, perhaps. Maybe something crazy happens that maybe between a couple drivers we wouldn't expect. But again, the race is just going to have to be run to figure that out. So that's going to be the situation there, too. Oh, yeah, you and Lastbro should do a driver and Bill Broderick costume for inspired by tonight's show. Yeah, did you guys enjoy that? Yeah, I was trying to kind of do it without saying anything about it, just to kind of add a little fun to it there. But in lieu of doing a costume like I did last year, I figured I'd have a little bit of fun. Big thanks again to Front Row Motorsports for the hats they sent. I figured I'd do a little hat. I meant to do this on last week's show. It occurred to me. Actually didn't occur to me. I talked with my mom about it. And she was like, hey, did you do a hat dance during the show? And I was like, no, I didn't do that. I should have done that. That would have been perfect with the reveal of this shirt and the banner back there. And I said, okay, no, it's cool. It's cool. We'll do this as a Halloween thing, and it'll be fun. We'll kind of lighten it up for the show here and do a little bit of the Bill Broderick thing. But yeah, I didn't think about with the headphones, with that. That made it a little bit more challenging there. But I hope you guys enjoyed that too. And big thanks again to Front Row Motorsports on that. Those are the different hats that they sent over. I definitely want to kind of try those out there for the show here tonight. I didn't want to sweat them up too much here too, because Lastbro and I are basically splitting them here at the point. We're just going to have kind of a front row box and just like, I don't know which ones he liked versus those ones there. But I thought that was pretty cool. So, that was kind of the deal here today. Also got Mom's zombie quilt here in the background. Got the got the clown mask and other stuff here too. So we kind of got a little bit of the Halloween motif for this weekend here too. Hope you guys have a good holiday on that tomorrow, and everything else on that end. Let us go into our show and tell segment here. I think we're going to do a wild card for the question there. No tires, just gas. Thank you for keeping track of the score there. I think we'll do that. First of all, for those of you, if you're in the Patreon, you already know what the magnet looks like, but I'll show it on the show here tonight. Because I got to show it here. Let us take a look, and here it is, folks. A Kyle Busch magnet will be on the door of our car here as we head down to Phoenix from Last Car headquarters. So it has all the names of the active members on here. Not too late to get your name on here. If you join any level of my Patreon, patreon.com/lastcaronbrock through the race weekend, which is even on race day next Sunday. So a whole week from today, you can get your name. Your name will be written on here. You'll be added into the drawing to win the magnet, and it'll be sent back to you there at that point. We've had several of these that we've given out here. This will be the last one for this season. Probably our first one next year. You know, again, I know it'll either be the Clash or Fontana. So it'll be the last one until February. But that's the one we have here. So there is your layout. You can see that a little bit better on camera here. So it will, again, of course, mark Eminem's last run in NASCAR, and we'll have that set up here for you guys. So if you're interested in getting on the magnet, and again, if you join the Patreon, make sure to include a mailing address on there, so you could be, so of course I know that you're interested in getting stuff by mail, because I do like to send out some stuff here and there. I got a newsletter I want to work on over the off season to get that sent out to Patreon members as well. And I got some swag, including some stickers, like the one I have on the back of my computer here, or here exactly rather, that we have on that too. So definitely look forward to that at the same time. I have another thing to show for our segment here, and I want to make sure I get this credited on this here at the same time. Alrighty. So another one, I'm not sure how many of you guys remember this from social media a little bit earlier this year, but there was a diecast thing I was kind of talking about where I was like, wow, I didn't know that they had diecast of these certain cars from back in the 2000 season. And I received a couple comments from this. I don't know they ever made it back then. Uh-oh, we had lag. Okay, we still have, I don't know if we're still lagging now. Hopefully we're not. Okay. Let me know if we're still having problems in the chat here, but I'll show this in the meantime here. Hopefully we still have audio here. You're getting lag on this? Okay, we'll wait in just a moment here. We're back. I saw it flicker out for a second there. We're good? Okay. It might have been the magnet. That might have screwed up our signal here. I do worry about that sometimes. The magnet kind of messes it up. Let me move that out of the way. Maybe that's been an issue. Okay, it started up again. We're good? Okay, so I'll start over here. Big thanks to Justin for sending this out to me here. 5-pack of these diecasts. I don't even remember Racing Champions, certainly these first three here, really the fourth one too, this David Green car here too. I don't remember them ever making any of these cars. This is Kenny Irwin's Busch car for the 2000 season, Elliott Sadler's Citgo car, the primary scheme, the one that flipped at Michigan in practice, Stacy Compton's Kodiak car, not the 92 car, the Dodge, but the original 9 car after he took over for Jerry Nadeau. I believe it was David Green's car in the Busch Series. I didn't follow the Busch Series as much. And the late, great Tony Roper, the Dr. Pepper car. I did see this Dr. Pepper car as a promo before in a cardboard Dr. Pepper container there. That was the same one that I brought to the track at Texas during our coverage back there. But big thanks to him on this. Let me show you this a little bit closer. Actually, I'll bring the camera over here this way. Can I get that untangled? There we go. You can kind of see this a lot better. There you go. So yeah, really good shape, and in the box too. Really cool on this. Thank you so much for bringing this out here. There's the, let me get that a little bit more in focus. There you go. Now you can see it a little better. I know they made Kenny Irwin's Cup car, but the Busch car, that's the first time I've ever seen that in the 64 scale. Then the 21 car, the Super Guard one. Check out the Stacy Compton one here. Very cool. I know it's the censored sponsorship. It was Kodiak Tobacco on it back then. They had a Cougar logo on the hood. Great paint scheme. I'd found some other merch of that in the past, but that is awesome. Then this older one here, I believe the Allen's Glass paint scheme there on that one. Yeah. So the CC Welliver's team, I believe, on that. And then, of course, the Washington Irving Motorsports number 50 car for Tony Roper on this. Really hip on this, too. So big thanks again to Justin for sending that over. And keep an eye on your mailbox, Justin, if you're watching the show tonight. Send a little something back your way as well. Yeah, very cool. Laspro did a double take when he saw that coming in the room. He was like, what on earth is that? Like, where'd those come from? So yeah, very cool. And these are the kind of things that they could do today. I know people got mad when I brought this up, but you know, when I brought up about the 5-pack that did of Kyle Busch's Xfinity Series wins, and the 5-pack they did. I'll admit that was pretty cool. I like the M&M's, the ice cream sandwiches car that he ran at Road America. If they made that by itself, I probably would have actually pulled the trigger on that because it looked pretty cool. But I like that Lionel looks like they're starting to kind of do these multi-pack things. Certainly the Championship 4 is set up a perfect way to do things like that. But something like this too, where maybe they would do a pack of like really obscure paint schemes, or maybe ones that would be kind of a special interest thing where, if you're interested in this, maybe you'd be interested in another scheme that, doesn't sell very well or something like that. I know it was a little bit disappointing, the news this week as well, that I guess they didn't reach the minimum sale quantity for Cody Ware's Nurtec car, which is too bad. I think the purple car would look really, really nice. It's a color that doesn't get used that often. And I think the 51 car looks pretty sharp with the racing stripes on it. I think it's a car that gets more well known, I think, that people expect. I know they haven't had exactly the best runs this year, but even they had that top 5 run over at Daytona this year, and had some solid performances along the way. Certainly an improvement. They were nowhere near last car contention in the Cup Series this season. I don't think Cody's even had a last place run this year. So, I think that's a really positive momentum shift to bring up here. In fact, I'm not even going to say it because I don't want to jinx anything at that point. But that would be another one to kind of look at there too. So, again, big thanks to Justin on that for setting that out. And I thought that was pretty cool there. At the same time. Let's see here. New track record. Oh, okay. Somebody said this on the last lap of NASCAR's race at Martinsville. According to Joseph Strigley on Twitter, Ross Chastain ran a lap of 100.482 miles per hour, 18.845 seconds. That is quicker than the series track record at the half-mile paperclip. Well, there you go. It is a new track record. The fastest lap recorded is a modified tour qualifying lap at 18.746 seconds versus his 18.845. So yeah, kind of a different circumstance there. Obviously, I guess that's a different way that they could look at it too from that. But very interesting. Thank you, Ross Chastain fan, for retweeting that there on the same section. But there you go. I've said from the start, I love the style of Trackhouse. They got an interesting swagger about them, and I've really enjoyed that. It's amazing to think this is only their second year in existence. Feels like they've been there a lot longer, but it just shows how quickly one of these organizations can really kind of grow up and kind of develop its own identity. And these are a couple of wild guys here for sure. So it's going to be we'll do trivia here too. We'll do some wild card questions because it looked like that was still the leader on this. But yeah, a crazy season. Again, hope for just a safe finish to the year. I'm seeing your questions on this about, what to look for at the end of the season. I hope it's going to be some good competitive racing, some surprise finishes along the way, good last car championship along the way here in the Xfinity Series side. Cup and Truck, of course, are already locked up. And I hope it's just a really entertaining and safe weekend to it so NASCAR can finish the changes made to the car and get into next season even stronger than before for the 75th anniversary season. They're going to have to clash at night, which is going to be really exciting. We're 50-50 on that. I need to figure out my vacation hours. That's kind of the big issue on that, whether or not I'm going to cover that next year. We're certainly going to cover Fontana. That's one thing we're looking at, and Sears Point in June. Wilkesboro, I'm now feeling I'm not sure if that's going to happen. After seeing the interview on the Dale Jr. download, I'm thinking that that is probably not going to happen because it was already so hard to try to get on the pre-list a couple weeks ago for the Wilkesboro thing. I'm sure the website's going to be just as locked up. What was it, November 2nd for the ticket sales there publicly. And the resale market is just going to be absolutely out of control. So probably not going to happen. I know I mentioned that a while back. That was one that we were stretching to kind of do. I'd still like to maybe as a fallback do the 600 instead. I think that would be kind of cool to do. I've been meaning to do something back in the Charlotte area again. I want to see the J.D. McDuffie mural. I'd love to do some more promotions, especially the Derek Cope book should be out by that point. And I'd love to do some marketing and stuff for that. I think doing it in Charlotte would be a great way to do it. Derek himself had great runs in the Coke 600. I know it's not the first race he's thought of course, his win in the Daytona 500, and of course his win at Dover, even in New Hampshire in the Xfinity Series as well, won in different venues. We're still looking at doing races in those areas at some point too. But I think in the near future, that's kind of our goal. It's still kind of a stretch goal at this point. I think worst case scenario, and this is not really a bad worst case scenario, it would just be Fontana in February. It would be Sears Point in June, and then Vegas and Phoenix in the fall. I'd like to still do both if possible. We've really enjoyed Vegas these last couple of years. I'd hate to take that off our schedule. Probably won't do the spring race there. That's a little bit trickier. Kind of save up and do the championship ones down the stretch. And as long as Phoenix is still a championship and something within driving distance, we're still going to be planning on those. So that's still going to be kind of our schedule for 2023. But for the championship weekend, yeah, I'm just hoping to just enjoy it. Have a crazy time that weekend. Hopefully, have some good competitive races. Give out certificates there before the race weekend. I'm not sure if we're going to do sponsorship this time. We did that at Sears Point with Brad Perez. We, of course, did it at Phoenix last year with Norm Benning. I don't know if Norm's coming out there, and I don't know what Brad's schedule looks like this time around. We'll see how that turns out. Don't have anything firm planned on that end there. We might not do that this time around here. But it was fun doing it for both of those, and it was a pleasure being a part of it on that. Yeah, I'd love to do Dover, no tires, just gas. I'd love to do that one. I think that would be great. I hear only good things about it. And I imagine that's a track that's really enjoyable in person versus how it looks like on TV. And I'm encouraged by that. I think the next gen car raced there pretty well this year too. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I think at best, probably in the near future, at least the way things are right now, really in our budget is probably about one race that we can go to that's outside of our immediate demographic. Again, the ones on the West Coast, we can drive to them. It's not too big of a deal. It's not too hard to set up. Big thanks to those of you in the Patreon, because you guys are a big reason that we're able to even put that in the conversation to do to begin with. But anything beyond that, out of market, we got to really put our eggs in one basket and try to just look at what's going to be a really good draw for it. Wilkesboro would be great, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's going to be very, very difficult to get. And people are going to be coming out of the woodwork for tickets or the media thing, which is great. It's going to get plenty of coverage. Maybe we'll do that for the second running of it. I think that might be the situation on that. Maybe when they get a bit more infrastructure out there and things kind of cool down a little bit. It'll probably be the same situation like we saw with Eldora and Knoxville and some of these other venues that really take off. So that's kind of what we're looking at next year. Those of you in the Patreon, I'll get you some more details on that too. I delayed the question here. Let me do a question here in the meantime, so you can kind of chew over that while I have this here. In the wild card section, what Florida city is hometown for Joe Nemechek? Wow, we talked about the Nemecheks tonight. We'll jump into this again. What Florida city is hometown for Joe Nemechek? That is our first question tonight. On this here too. Oh, it looks like it started a new stream. Is that what happened? Okay, it shows live for 11 minutes. That's bizarre. Well, I guess we'll see how this shakes out. It looks like we have about the same amount of viewers in here. Hopefully, anybody that missed out on the stream stays in here. But we'll see what happens there. I don't know if this gets linked up with the other video or not. We'll find out. I'm going to check that out, obviously, when the stream wraps up here tonight. What Florida city is hometown for Joe Nemechek is our first question. Yeah. While I have this too, I have other updates on videos for the channel here too. So the large project I'm working on, I already announced this before, 500 Days, which is going to be focused on the storylines behind the 2001 Daytona 500. We have made great progress on that these last couple weeks, especially during Vegas. I already posted this in the Patreon. I think I had it as a preset post. Has it already been posted in there? Let me make sure it's there. If it isn't there, I want to make sure that it is. Okay, the certificate's on that. Let me get that on here. Yeah, if you're in the Patreon, you can see the new ones on this. Okay, this has not been posted yet, so let me get that post put on here. So I'll just touch on a little bit of this here too. But I can tell you that, well, actually, I'll check that after here so you guys don't have to just watch me look at my screen. So the next video is still in the works. I'm hoping to have it done sometime in November. And I know it's been pushed back a lot, but you'll see why once it's finally released. It's a multi-part video series on the 2001 Daytona 500, other storylines involving it. Very video heavy. I'm also working with Brian Hallman on some content for that as well. We're kind of getting that going there too. That's going to be very big on that. Those of you who are in the Patreon, especially $5 and up, you'll have advance access to that video when it is done. There's also going to be a status update on that video for you guys. It's going to be posted in the Patreon very soon. So you'll be able to kind of see where I am with it and other updates on where that's been going. So that's been coming together. So that's been kind of where I've been, especially since the Stanton Barrett project got kind of kicked back. I've been kind of focusing 100% on getting that going here. I think it's going to be kind of delayed a bit this week as we're going to be focusing much more on Phoenix. The Entry List Storylines article, of course, is going to be very big this week for the Truck Series, Xfinity, and Cup. And then we'll be back into working on the video at that point. I think once the season wraps up, it's going to come together pretty quickly. Hopefully, I'd love to get the first part up by around Thanksgiving. I'd love to get it set up at that point and get it wrapped up in December. But we'll see. Again, I don't have anything really too firm on this point. I don't want to post a trailer until I know the parts are pretty much ready to go. But we're getting there. We're making really good progress on that, and I think that's going to be very exciting here for you guys. So I hope you guys look forward to that. It's going to have a lot of interesting details in there and kind of view that whole story in an even larger way. You know, something not just on the obvious aspects of it. Obviously, Dale Earnhardt's going to play a big role in it, unavoidably, and of course what happened on the last lap of the race. But we're going to also talk about other things that happened during that race and also the lead up to it. And I think that's going to be a part of it, kind of like NASCAR Man's approach to the Dan Weldon story in his video that he did last year. I thought that was excellent. And I was kind of taking inspiration from that to kind of approach it this way too. But it ended up being a much larger project than I thought it was going to be, which I think is going to be something that you're definitely going to want to check out once that gets up. So that'll be there too. Alrighty. So what Florida city is hometown for Joe Nemechek? The answer is Lakeland. Lakeland, Florida is indeed the correct answer. Lakeland. A lot of you got that one too. Andrew Bremner, you got that one like right away. Dover might be iffy this year because it might be in the musical. This show is same. Gotcha. Or doing anything goes. Right on. There you go. Yeah, Dover could be cool. We'll see. I mean, our summer schedule is pretty wide open. I think right now it's probably, I think, again, gas prices are one thing and just other stuff. But I mean, again, I don't want to make too many excuses about it because everybody's dealing with the same thing here. But I'd love to do Fontana again, and Sears Point for sure. And those two are really affordable to do. They're not too bad. The Clash is a little iffy because it's so close to Fontana. Really enjoyed doing it this year. It was an honor to be there for the inaugural one. Would love to do it again. If you guys are interested, I'm totally on board. So whatever you guys are interested in on that, whatever is going to be some good last place battles. It was tricky at the All-Star at the Clash because of course people drop out in the middle of the infield and you can't get down there until the race is over with. So it was a little tricky to kind of track things happening in the moment. But we'll see. We'll see. It could be something else that's happening there too. Next question here. How many laps did Lee Petty drive with young Richard on his hood at High Point? I'm sorry, let me read this again here. I didn't phrase that very well. How many laps did Lee Petty drive with young Richard on his hood at High Point? I don't think he means decal. I guess Richard was riding along on the hood of the car. Wow. How many laps did Lee Petty drive with young Richard on his hood at High Point? That is our next question. We got guesses for 5 laps, 100 laps. Yeah, we're all over the board here. Getting parched here, my goodness. Old Ross Chastain is drained Dreamy, man. I feel like I drove in that race after the end of this thing. It was man, oh man. Have we had to we had to call on inspection yet? I haven't looked yet. I gotta look here again. Uh Here we go. Bob Pockris posted 26 minutes ago. NASCAR spokesperson said that the move was within the bounds of the rule book and will discuss any driver concerns this week. So again, NASCAR might take a hard line stance on this. They might not allow it at Phoenix. They might just say, okay, well, that was fun, but maybe we'll close the book on it. That's possible. That's possible. And I think if that happens, I don't think that's going to be too big of a loss. This will just be kind of one of those crazy things. I guess they don't want to over complicate it either. It's like, how early can you go into the wall or something? Or, what's the situation where you accidentally get in the wall versus purposefully? I don't know. But yeah, at least that's Pockris posting 26 minutes ago on that. I think having the Busch Clash at night, though, I think that's a great idea, because when we were there for qualifying, it was unfortunate. The schedule was a little disorganized. It really needed a couple things. It needed some support series, at least one, to kind of run, and maybe some gimmicks in the alternative. I'll give credit. It was great, and it was a great venue. It was great being there, but there just wasn't enough support series. The qualifying races were great. That was on Sunday, but when they had qualifying at night and they had the torch going, that was really cool. And the qualifying session was so short, there was just no time to really enjoy it. And fans just basically had just enough time to get in there and then get back out. I don't know if they just have really early curfew at Exposition Park. That's probably the case, or Olympic Park rather. But that was kind of the situation there on that end. But yeah, they had other gimmicks where they had like the drivers ride bicycles around it or something, or like have people jogging around it or something, or just something else that kind of promoted the track itself. I think they just weren't quite sure what they had or what the complications of it would be. So they needed to kind of, I think that's probably why they didn't have other things that were going on, but they need to add something to it. The other thing is too, I couldn't believe they didn't have fan access to practice when it happened. They had practice pretty much the entire first day, and nobody could get in. I could get in there with media, but like there were people, you couldn't have people go in to check out the souvenir stands and stuff. There just wasn't enough time. So then by the time people came in on Sunday, you didn't have time to grab food, use the bathroom, listen to the concerts, watch the race, find your seat. There just wasn't enough time. And there are a lot of people that just missed the concerts. They're grabbing food or going to the bathroom or something because they wanted to get back and see the race. And that's unfortunate because there was so much stuff going on. They needed to really space it out, add some other preliminary events or something and add that to it. Maybe having it at night tells me that maybe they're going to fill the earlier part of the day with other stuff that's going on. Maybe open the gates at like noon and have the whole afternoon where people could walk the track, walk the premises, buy your merch, get your food. You got to have all that. Media people will be there any number of times, any number of hours. But for fans, they got to have all the time to do that. There just wasn't time. I'm so glad I grabbed the programs the first day I was there when there was like nobody there. Because if I waited until the second day, it was going to be completely impossible. Those were just swamped. And that was when they didn't even have any merch for really any of these teams at the time. So that was kind of the situation. Yeah. But yeah, I think the Clash will go smoother. I think it'll be better on this. I think they handled it pretty well. There were a lot of, paid parking. Parking was kind of tricky. Because, there were a lot. Luckily, college football games are as big as they are. So, in LA, there's no shortage of parking places. So, it wasn't too hard to find a place. They would charge parking. I don't remember how much it was. It didn't seem like it was too much. Certainly not college football prices. I know that gets really out of control. Yeah, I don't know where media parking was. We parked in one structure. I'm not even sure if it was where we were supposed to go because there were only like a few other cars in there, and I was worried we were going to get kind of locked in there on the first day. We didn't have that issue, but we couldn't get in there the second day. And it's like, okay, well, look, we're just going to find the first place we could park and just get in there. And, it was a bit of a walk to get over there, but not unreasonably so. Having it at night, it's a little, it could be a little iffy down there after dark. Not too bad. I think NASCAR put some good security up around the park, and also the Olympic Park staff people we're keeping a pretty close eye on everything there too. Once you get outside the campus, it's a little iffy, so you don't want to park too far from it. But again, I've never been to New York City or something like that, but I've been to San Francisco, and it's not that sketchy, but it's it can get a little sketchy in some areas in LA for sure. I don't think that's unusual knowledge, but yeah, I remember going to USC. It was like that. USC. Well, I guess yeah. Well, I mean, USC is that area, so that's kind of what that is. Oh yeah. How about we answer this question? How many laps did Lee Petty drive with young Richard on his hood at high points? And the answer is one. One is the correct answer. Yeah, USC is literally across the street. It is, exactly. But it's amazing like how much you got to go through from the football stadium to USC to the edge of the campus there too. I mean, it's kind of a big park. There's like a couple, there's all these museums around it. It's really a big park. I mean, I guess it had to be if it was hosting the Olympics back in, what, 84? So that's kind of a big thing there too. One is the correct answer. How many laps did Lee Petty have with Richard on the hood? So literally on the hood of the car. Richard Petty was on there for one lap, so that would be interesting. Yeah, we'll probably wait. I mean, this will be our last show until the Tuesday after. Oh my goodness. They posted the video. Trackhouse 2 hours ago posted the video from the onboard camera. I was wondering when this was going to show up. I'm going to have to retweet this so you can check it out. Absolutely crazy. There you go. But yeah, so we're going to do a... that's interesting. But yeah, we'll do... so we got the show here today. The next show is going to be most likely probably Tuesday night after Phoenix. Again, I know they have like rooms at the... I got to ask about... these. I don't know if I bring all my gear with me and do it like that. I don't know if we'd be able to do it. I mean, we certainly don't have. I appreciate you guys watching here, but we don't have the larger show like what Claire B. Lang has and some of these other people at MRN and Sirius XM and stuff. One of these days it'd be great to be able to do one of these shows like right after the race and like get your guys' reaction from the media center. I think that would be pretty cool. I don't know. I haven't talked with the folks at NASCAR about that if they do extra rooms. I'm sure that space is of a priority, and I'm sure any number of people that do YouTube channels would be clamoring to try to get space there. But I'd love to do that. I mean, maybe one of these times that'll be possible. Not sure if that's going to be possible at Phoenix, because I know it's going to be a championship, and they're going to have everybody in there. Yeah, that'd be kind of interesting. Next question here, folks. What stock car legend christened his boat Little K? K-A-Y. What stock car legend christened his boat Little K? K-A-Y. What are you going to be for Halloween? I'm afraid I'm just going to be me. I didn't really plan anything on this. I didn't do a costume like last year. I think the one I picked didn't show on camera very well. I thought of doing something like that this year, and then when we got this and I thought of the hat dance thing, I decided to do that instead. So that's probably the closest I'm going to get to doing that this year. But if any of you guys in the comment, or any of you folks in the comment there are doing something for Halloween, definitely let me know in the chat here. What stock car legend christened his boat Little K? K-A-Y is the question. Still not seeing any response here on the technical inspection yet. I guess we can do a couple more questions here tonight, folks. What stock car legend christened his boat Little K? K-A-Y. And the answer is Bill France Sr. Bill France Sr. I don't think anybody guessed that. I wouldn't have guessed that. I was thinking drivers with the last name K. I was thinking like, yeah, like a Schrader or Kowicki or something like that. I like the one that guessed Tim Richmond. That's a good guess too. And it said stock car legend, so I guess it seemed to imply driver, but it said, yeah. What stock car legend christened his boat Little K? And the answer is Bill France Sr. Did not know that. Yeah. That's right. Big E's boat was Sunday Money. That's true. I know he went down to, well, again, remember the video in the Field Filler series where we talked with Dean Arnold and going down to one of the keys down there. But yeah, I really do think that was, I think the meeting that, that Dean Arnold remembered in that video, talking about his father, Don Arnold, and Dale Earnhardt and Michael Waltrip. That might have been the meeting where they were going to lock up, Michael Waltrip driving the 15 car. I mean, it must have been either 99 or 2000. I know, the deal came together a bit later, kind of during the season. But he must have been privy to that moment. I know it was kind of an interesting interview. I called Dean right before Thanksgiving, so I'm sure he was already enjoying on vacation somewhere there. But that was a really entertaining interview, and I'm glad I got some connection to the Arnold family for that video. So that was a fun one to put together. The Field Filler series is still going to keep going here. The Stanton Barrett one, I'd like to still do a video on him because I think he's got a fascinating background, and I don't want to overhype that here, but I think whenever we get that done, it's going to be good. What I may end up deciding to do is not hold up the Field Filler series to get that one done. And we'll just move along here too. I'm going to decide to do that after we get this next project done here, and that'll be over the off season. The other priority, of course, is going to be getting the Derek Cope book done and getting the audio book recorded because I want to get that. I'd love to get that done over the off season here because it'll be a perfect time to get that done and make sure the quality is good. So that's another one to look at. But yes, Big E, Big F, I guess. Big Bill France Sr. Christened his boat Little K. Okay, next question here, folks. What Conover, North Carolina driver is known as racing's best roller skater? What Conover, North Carolina driver is known as racing's best roller skater? Alrighty. What Conover, North Carolina driver is known as racing's best roller skater? Alrighty. Yeah, Nemechek hometown is not Lakeland. It wouldn't surprise me if this thing was still incorrect about something, but yeah, it said Lakeland on this one. Dover is great in person. So is Pocono if you're in the area, although I know it's a more polarizing opinion. No, Alexander, I think that Pocono would be good too. I think that it's, the speeds at Pocono are, impressive. And I like the kind of, older aspect to it. Okay. What Conover, North Carolina driver is known as racing's best roller skater? Is our question. Yep, too easy. You guys all got it. Morgan Shepherd, of course, is the answer. Field Fillers feature there. Morgan Shepherd. Except for when he falls on pit road. Yep, exactly. Next question. What was Bobby Isaac's middle name? What was Bobby Isaac's middle name? What was Bobby Isaac's middle name? What was Bobby Isaac's middle name is the next question. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in here, too. This has been a pretty wild show and had a pretty wild start to it there, too. I apologize for those of you who were waiting a long time during the opening part of it there. I had a couple things to take care of really quick right after the race there. And, but I wanted to leave the chat open to get to everybody so everybody could get their first reactions to the finish. That was really enjoyable there, too. There we go. Okay. What was Bobby Isaac's middle name is the question. We got guesses for Code Red. There you go. Vance, Rusty, you got me. None. Dangerous. Dangerous AJ Allmendinger. Jay Roberts. Too bad Allmendinger's not in the Final Four, but, you know, it is what it is. I mean, you know, I think those loose wheels on the right side of his car at Las Vegas probably were what doomed him in this playoff thing. He did just about everything else right that he could. But that unscheduled stop. And he did have to do it because he felt like the wheels were going to come right off. And, you know, you certainly couldn't have a situation where he would, you know, potentially, risk his life out there. So, yeah. What was Bobby Isaac's middle name is the question. The answer is Vance. Vance is the correct answer. I think a couple of you got that. It's Chris M. Collecting. You got it. And I think you were the first one. Bad Booking, you got it too. Dangerous AJ Allmendinger. By the way, those of you who are in the Patreon or thinking about it, we're very close to our next Patreon goal of doing another starting grid video, which is for the Cup, Xfinity, or Truck Series. Obviously now with one race left to go this season, that would apply for next season. Not really going to have time to do ones for Phoenix. I don't think we're going to hit that mark anyway before then, which is fine. But if we do hit the mark here this weekend, we'll just open it up for anything next season. So Cup, Xfinity, or Truck. Not including the Daytona 500. I'm already planning on doing that one. So this will be for like a bonus grid. So if you want me to do one for, I don't know, if we want to do Portland for the Xfinity series, or if we want to do, whatever crazy stuff the Truck Series is doing, or if we want to do the thing at Wilkesboro, we can do that. That's going to be kind of what we're looking at there. So again, if you're interested in that, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. I think we're pretty close on that one. Alrighty, next question. What May 1991 event was Tim Flock's last stock car race? Think about that. What May 1991 event was Tim Flock's last stock car race? Code Red, not just a delicious soda, also the name of the dance team at the prestigious Ball State University. I did not know that, Austin. There you go. Patsy Conte, I'd seen your comment there. First race, 1976 Daytona 500. You picked a perfect time to start there. My goodness. Yeah. Well, talk about a wild ending. I mean, we saw what we had today, and then you had, you can kind of think back to really crazy races that, happen on the short tracks on top of it. I mean, not the 500 like you're mentioning, of course, but similar time period. I mean, wasn't there a race at Wilkesboro where like Bobby Allison and Richard Petty just completely beat each other's cars to pieces, going for the lead there, and like Petty beat him in there? I mean, it's, it could be just kind of something like that here. What May 1991 event was Tim Flock's last stock car race? That is a question. Bad Booking. Are you pulling my leg, man? Are you pulling my leg? Hang on. Am I going to have to rewrite something here? Oh, are you serious? Are you serious? Okay. Alrighty. Hang on. I gotta do a thing. You gotta do a thing, people. Hang on. All right. Tech is complete. Bob Pockrass posts 1 minute ago. Brad Keselowski disqualified for failing minimum weight. That won't change the playoff. Bell is the winner. It won't change the playoff, and it'll actually move. It should move Ross Chastain up to fourth, shouldn't it? Because Kes got fourth, didn't he? Oh my gosh. Yeah, Kes got fourth. So that will drop Keselowski to last. That will not move McLeod out of the bottom five, and it will not move Corey LaJoie to last place. So regardless, BJ McLeod will still be your last car champion for the Cup Series this year. So for the second time this season. Last time being at Pocono, we do have live on air. Good call, no tires, just gas, to wait up here till the announcement on inspection for sure, because it does turn out that is the case. So Tyler Reddick will not be your last place finisher after his dizziness symptoms there during the race, and it will not be the first last place run for the number 8 at Martinsville since 1994. In fact, we'll have to pull up some new stats here. Yes, Brad Keselowski is going to be, wow, yeah, my goodness. Okay, well, we got some new stats that we got to dig through here, and we'll be rewriting the article after the show here. Brad Keselowski. Let's get some stats here, folks. How about that? Let's do that, because I'm gonna have to do this. Dang, I had a whole thing set up with the Jeff Burton last place. I'm glad I brought it up on the show, but oh well, we'll do that. Well, again, we'll be there in Phoenix next week. If something crazy happens at the end of inspection there, I mean, we'll be there to find out when the folks come in to make the announcement. So let's take a look here, folks. G, and let's look at. Okay, not that one. Wow. All right, folks. So get this. Unofficially, so I guess, again, I guess unless the disqualification is repealed, but again, it could be a different situation there too. So instead of the first last place run for the number 8 since 1994 at Martinsville, it is the first last place run for the number 6 in a Cup race at Martinsville since April 25th, 1982. With good old buddy DK Ulrich, a legendary interviewee on the Scene Vault podcast. His Buick crashed after 14 laps. And this was, let's see. There you go. DK Ulrich. And let's take a look at the race results on that and kind of get that verified. Just check it here. It's on my stats page. Double check and make sure they didn't have anybody else disqualified from that one. Martinsville, this would be Harry Gant winning in a 31-car field. Correct. DK Ulrich listed out with a crash after 14 laps, wrecked in turn 1. Donnie Allison, Benny Parsons, Buddy Baker, and Kyle Petty, your bottom 5 runners in that one. Morgan Shepherd in that race too. So, okay. Oh, yeah, the 91 question. What May 1991 event was Tim Flock's last stock car race? The question again. The answer is the Winston Legends race. A lot of you got that one. Winston Legends race is the correct answer. So that is the race on the bull ring there. So a few of you got that one. Yes, the Winston Legends race, the race on the bull ring. It was not the 600. It was not the Open, but it was run the same weekend as the Winston. So that's why it was May in 91. So not a points race, but an exhibition. So there you go. So Brad Keselowski is going to be your last car feature for today. So I got to rewrite the article, at least portions of it. That's okay. We'll get that set up for you guys. We'll have some more statistics on that, and we'll bring that up in a bit. So again, Brad Keselowski with what should be, let's get other stats up here, folks. Keselowski. Nope, we don't need that. We don't need that sound. Only the second last place finish. Okay, so that'll be Brad's second last place finish in a Cup Series points race, which would be the first since August of 2020 at Michigan. I remember that distinctly because I picked him in my fantasy league, and then he finished last for the first time in his career. So the second last place finish for him, and of course the first driving for Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing. And I think that might be the first. I don't think Buescher finished last this year, so it might be the first for Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing as well. So that's up there too. So yeah, my goodness, I guess a little bit of craziness to throw on top of everything else here at the end of the day, folks. But yeah, so again, we do have post-race inspection. BJ McLeod is still your 2022 Last Car Cup Series champion. It will be awarded a certificate next week. Brad Keselowski is your last place finisher for today's Cup Series race, the Xfinity 500, failing post-race weights, I believe it said there. Yes, failing minimum weight is exactly the terms there, but will not change the playoff. Bell is still the race winner, so kudos to Bell. and the other competitors in the field. So I think that'll probably be a good place to leave the show here tonight, folks. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Crazy day. Congratulations to Christopher Bell, BJ McLeod as well for the championship certificate. The championship 4 is set in all 3 series. I think we are setting up to a pretty dramatic conclusion to the championship in Phoenix. I will be attending along with Last Bro. We're going to be heading out on Wednesday, so stay tuned to my Twitter feed at LastCarOnBrock for updates all this weekend, including more magnet pictures. If you want to get your name on the magnet and entered into a drawing to win it, you can enter at patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock anytime between now and the race, the championship race itself, a week from today, next Sunday. In the meantime, definitely check out, again, my Twitter feed at LastCarOnBrock, the website, lastcar.info. And any other videos on this channel. Our next show is going to be the Tuesday, most likely the Tuesday after the championship, probably about the same time, about 6 p.m. Pacific time, which is about 9 p.m. Eastern. Might change that depending on what time we get back. Updates on that will also be on my Twitter feed at LastCarOnBrock. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great Halloween. Hope you enjoyed the weekend, enjoyed the show here today, and look forward to our championship coverage here as we go into that, and we'll talk about it again next week, and we'll go back in from there. And let me make sure I didn't miss anything here. Okay, good. I got those. All right. I gave the question. Okay. Make sure I didn't leave a question. I saw people talking about Cale Yarborough. Make sure I didn't leave any questions open on that. So, all right, folks. So, again, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.